Participants, thank you so much for logging on. I can see Frank Chiberu, I can see Pius Okwako, I can see Thompson Chare, I see William Chivirige, and Johnson Mukula. Thank you so much for logging on. This is CTA 6, and we are waiting for someone to log in. I'm seeing Solomon Haviona, I'm seeing William Ainumusha, I'm seeing Alina Kanyesije. Yeah, people are logging in. And as you can see, you are accessing freely. We have opened the session at 11, and the presenter will be coming on shortly. But in the meantime, we are giving them 4 minutes, those who are still logging in, to join, and then at 11:05, we shall start. Kindly log in and be patient a bit, and at 11:05, we shall start. Thank you. Participants, you're welcome. This is CTA 6, indirect taxes. As promised, I repeat my promise, but the facilitator is having connectivity challenges. We are supposed to actually have started by now. I'd said 11:05, but engaged her. She should be able to come on shortly. Kindly bear with us as she resolves the connectivity challenges. We are sorry indeed. Participants, we are sorry indeed. But don't give up, because the presenter is ready, only that the machine is taking time to restart. She had a challenge with the machine, the location, and it's taking time to restart. But be sure we have the presentation, and I'm sure it will go on, and it runs from 11 to half past midday. Since we are losing some digital time, maybe we shall end maybe at the 20 to 1, but we shall have the presentation done. Can they keeping on? Members were still on, but we have now engaged IT at high level to open the session. Otherwise, I see the presenter is still locked out of the session. And it's now 25 past. So I'll give an updated communication after 11:30. But in the meantime, she's still trying to log in. Yes, be patient a bit and see. Members still on. I still have the patience. I still have the hope that the presenter will come on. Yes. participants were reluctant to reschedule this because rescheduling is more of an inconvenience again. That's why I urge you to keep the patience, and we sort the presenter and ensure that she's connected. Otherwise, if we put in the option of rescheduling, it may end up interfering with other works ahead. Let's see what happens in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, our presenter is finally on. We're very sorry for the delay. The presenter is a land friend, Dorcas Tuchumbirwe Kabaho. Dorcas is a tax manager at KPMG Uganda, over 10 years of experience providing legal, tax compliance, and tax advisory services. Dorcas has a Bachelor of Laws from Makerere University, has a postgraduate diploma in legal practice from LDC, MOOC, has a postgraduate diploma in taxation and revenue administration. He has got also advanced diploma in international taxation of UK. She is vast with skills in advisory. She has engaged in international companies on various tax issues. She has she's one of the few people with advanced diploma in international taxation from governing, rather relating to international taxation, international treaties, and intergovernment relationships in tax matters. Dorcas is a senior staff at KPMG, as I have already said, and she has a niche of advising companies in respect to advisory mergers and acquisitions. Prior to joining KPMG, Dorcas worked at PKF Uganda and PKF Kenya. She's a member of Uganda Law Society, a member of East African Law Society, and is a member of Chartered Institute of Taxation. So allow me to quickly welcome and allow Dorcas Shungwirwe Kabaho to take us through the presentation. Dorcas, you're welcome.
Thank you, Justus. Good morning, everyone. And I start by apologizing for having an IT glitch that caused my delay to join. I will probably try and put on my screen so that you can see the person presenting for a short time, and then I'll disconnect. But it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to have this engagement with you as students of CTA, as people looking forward to be tax experts. So I look forward to having an interactive discussion. I look forward to learning from you and hearing from you in this discussion that we are going to have, or engagement for, for the time that they have slotted this. So I will, like Justus introduced me, that's who I am. My name is Dorcas Kabaho, and I currently work with KPMG as a tax manager. And I'll be walking you through paper 6 that specifically speaks to indirect taxes. So when we talk about indirect taxes, there are a number of laws that govern indirect taxes. Allow me to share my screen, share my presentation. My presentation is a bit summarized because I expect this to be an interactive discussion where I will be getting a lot from you. So just a minute so that I can share my screen with you, and then we can hit the road running. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen. Justus, please confirm that you can see my screen. Okay, I hope you're seeing my screen. So when I talk about indirect taxes, we are looking at various laws that govern indirect taxes.
Dorcas,
And yes?
are you able to put it in slide mode, presentation mode?
Is that okay?
Not yet. There is this other icon down right. Down right.
Mine is in presentation mode.
Sure. Okay. Let's go.
Okay. So when we talk about indirect taxes, we are talking about various laws, and the major one being the Value Added Tax Act. And then there is the Stamp Duty Act of 2014 as amended. And then the Excise Duty Act 2014 as amended. And the Lotteries and Gaming Act of 2016 as amended. Majorly, those are the major laws that govern indirect taxes. And that's what my presentation will be focusing about. And this is where basically when examiners are setting, this is where largely they will pick the questions. So as a student preparing for paper 6 of CTA, you need to be well versed at the very least with these 4 laws or with these 4 acts: the VAT Act, the Stamp Duty Act, the Excise Duty Act, and the Lotteries and Gaming Act, because that is where largely the examiners will expect students to, answer from, or that's where the questions will largely be coming from. So when we talk about indirect tax paper 6, what are we looking at, or what is CPA targeting to, what should a student expect to come out with at the end of the course when you have completed your paper 6 and many other papers that are included in the CTA syllabus? What is expected of you, or what is the outcome that is expected for a learner to have gained out of paper 6? So paper 6 largely is to equip you with knowledge and skills on indirect taxes. As someone who is looking out to be a tax expert, you cannot be without the knowledge and the skills on indirect taxes. So paper 6, as a paper 6, the purpose is to equip you with that knowledge, to test your skills from a theoretical, a law, and a practical perspective. When the examiner is setting, they are checking, are you actually up to date with the laws that govern indirect taxes? Do you have the skills? Do you have the practical skills when a scenario is presented to you? How do you approach it with the knowledge that you have gained from indirect taxes? Because as we are learning, or as we are students, and later when we come into the field or into practice, you realize that tax is an everyday thing. It's I don't want to call it a living thing, but it's an everyday thing. You will not get a clear question of what is stamp duty. It will be a scenario, and this I'm speaking from experience as someone who has practiced for the last 12 years. You will be faced with scenarios that you will have to apply yourself to, and you cannot apply yourself to those scenarios or circumstances or situations if you're not equipped with the knowledge that you require. Specifically for indirect taxes, you will have to be equipped with the various laws that I have spoken about. So as a student or as a learner at the end, or as you're learning paper 6, we expect that at the end of the course, or at the end of this paper, you're able to examine VAT. And when I talk about VAT, I'm talking about refunds and offsets of VAT, registrations, deregistrations, VAT returns and assessments. When should someone register? When should someone be deregistered? When can someone file a return of VAT? How does a return of VAT look like? When can URA assess someone a VAT assessment? When is someone in a refund position or in a claimable position? And what do they do about that? That is what is expected, that at the end of this course or at the end of this paper, you are equipped with such understanding about VAT. You should be able to advise VAT implications on imported services. What happens when, a person receives services from Kenya, services from Turkey, services from Dubai? From a VAT perspective, are there tax implications? And how do we go about them? You should be equipped to know time and place of supply. Do we know what a supply of good is? Do we know what a supply of services is? What is a place of supply, or what is that time of supply of good or service? So at the end of this course, we expect that as a learner, you will be equipped with such. You should be able to interpret VAT in regard to the various case laws that are being concluded by the Tax Appeals Tribunal and other courts of judicature. In addition to VAT, of course, you'll be expected to advise on lotteries and gaming activities. You should be in a position to know the administration of excise duty and how it's computed. you should be able to know when is stamp duty applicable. What is it applicable on? What kind of instruments are chargeable to stamp duty? So essentially, in summary, those are some of the outcomes that we expect a learner to have at the end of this course. So when I was preparing, I was asked to give tips because paper 6 has
Excuse
been...
me, Dorcas.
Yes?
Are you able to see your slides? We are seeing one slide. I'm seeing one slide here. I don't know whether it's only me.
Eh,
I'm
but
seeing the
I've
slide
moved
of
on to
governing
the
laws.
next.
Sure.
You're still on governing laws. I was speaking on learning. Just a minute, guys.
I'm seeing the direct tax governing. Now it's moving. Now it's moving.
So has
Learning
it
outcomes. I can see.
So has it moved now
I'm seeing learning outcomes now. Yeah, it has shifted it to. You can do an
to general
overview of.
tips?
Yes. Learning outcomes is what is on now. Otherwise,
Okay,
it has been one.
learning outcomes are what I was speaking about. And I thought, sorry about that. I thought my screen was showing. Are we able to see general tips on preparing and passing exams? Justus, can you see my screen?
Now I'm seeing learning outcomes.
Oh, wow.
General tips.
Okay.
General
Then
tips
allow
on
me to
preparing.
just present this way. Because when I put in presentation mode, I think it doesn't shift.
That's general tips. Now you're there. Learning outcomes, but general tips, yeah.
Okay. So on general tips on how to pass or how to prepare for exams, what we advise that you engage in discussions with groups. After your classes, ensure that you engage in group discussions. From group discussions, you're able to understand the hardest tax aspects or topics in the simplest way. When you sit down with your friends in a group and you try to break down what seems to be hard, someone is able to explain it in the easiest or simplest way for you to appreciate. So we encourage that you engage in group discussions. That's a tip of preparing for exams. You need to be well versed with the tax laws. That I cannot overemphasize. You're not going to be a tax expert if you avoid tax laws. Tax is a creature of statute. Tax comes from the law. Tax is, I hope you understand when I say it's a creature of statute. It's a child born from the law. There's no tax with no law. I know many accountants like to think that tax is, tax is a composition of both the law and accounting. So you've got
Excuse
to
me,
be...
Dorcas.
Yes?
I'm sorry I'm interrupting you over and over again.
No, it's okay.
Okay. At your end, are you reading slide mode or you went back to the other mode?
I went to the other mode because when I put in presentation mode, it doesn't move.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
we
why I
go.
went to other, so that we are able to see. Okay, so
All
I
right,
was saying, you will have to be well versed with the tax laws because tax is a composition of both law and accounting. So you cannot just say, I will be an accountant, I will not read laws, laws are for lawyers and all that. But even me as a tax practitioner, I have had to embrace accounting and yet I'm a lawyer. So for you to be a benchmark, an outstanding tax practitioner, you're going to have to embrace reading the tax laws because tax comes from the laws. So you must be aware by now that every 1st July, actually, usually when the budget is ready in June, somewhere mid-June, there are tax proposals that come about. So every 1st July of every year, there are new tax changes or new tax amendments happening. Now, that's what makes tax interesting. Tax, you cannot say what you knew last year is what you will keep knowing and you will call yourself an expert of tax. No, you've got to keep moving and embrace change, because like I said, every year tax amendments are passed with the budget. So effective 1st July of every year, there are new tax amendments. They could be 3, they could be 10. So you'll find a number of tax laws. And specifically here, I'll talk about indirect taxes. You'll find a number of indirect tax laws being amended every 1st July. So it's very important that you get acquainted with tax laws. The same applies to decided cases. I want to encourage you to try and look out for cases, especially those that come from the tax tribunal. When you read those cases, they help you, they actually break down the issues very well for you to understand. They will not be filled with legal jargon and all that. They try to bring the issues down to a layman understanding. So it's important that as you prepare for your exams, you're well versed with the tax laws and decided cases. Because as an examiner, when an examiner is marking, there's an extra mark given when you quote the law or when you quote a decided case. Then it's very important that you read all the tax topics as per the syllabus. Avoid spotting. I don't know if it's still called spotting. In our days, we used to call it spotting, where you sit and decide to think what the examiner will say. I think this topic is the most, tricky one. This is where the examiner will come from. Avoid that and try and have an understanding of all the tax topics as listed on the syllabus for paper 6. Understand the tax period for each tax head, and that is very key, because that is one of the areas where we have seen learners or students fail. You present a question to a student, it's VAT. VAT is on a monthly basis. It's not an annual tax. Its period is a month. So because information has been given to you for various months, you decide to aggregate everything for all the months. And yet VAT is on a monthly basis. So it's important to understand the tax periods for each tax head you're looking at. If it's VAT, understand its tax period. If it's excise duty, understand its tax period. If it's stamp duty, understand its tax period, because that's the only way that you'll pass your exam. Of course, another tip that I would give is arrive early at the exam to avoid panicking. Arriving at the exam when it's past time and then you're trying to get where to sit, you're fidgeting here and there. Be there on time so that, you try to calm down on your nerves, get your seat early, be on time. Being on time puts you in focus, in that when the exam is given to you, you're on time, you follow the instructions and all that. I think the next was to read instructions very carefully. Exam instructions, it's very, very key. Now, for indirect taxes, paper 6, we are aware that the first question is compulsory and it carries 50 marks. Then the other 3, you choose 2 that carry 20, 25, 25. Now, for some students, you find when they have decided to attempt all the 3 questions in section B, which takes up their time and they fail to complete. So you'll find everything is half, half, half. As opposed to having read instructions very clearly, you attempt the first question and then do 2 in section B. Then it's advisable that you attempt the questions you feel you're very, very versed with. For example, when that question paper is presented to you and they tell you read through and now start, I am very sure when you read through, there's that question where things probably come easily, as opposed to another question where you need to think through, and think through. So for those where you feel you're well versed, start with that. That helps you to save on exam time and manage time for the exam. Then pay more attention to the requirements of the question and ensure that each section of the question is attempted. We've seen that students rush as they read through the question. You rush, you don't, see the requirements of the question. The examiner, when examiners are setting, they hide certain items in there that when you do a rush reading, you will miss out. So it's important that you carefully, and based on paper 6, they give you 15 minutes to just read through the questions. So it's important that you utilize those 15 minutes to read through each question and understand its requirement, and then proceed to attempt. Moving on, it's also important to ascertain the amounts. When, for example, for question 1, I'll speak to question 1, and this is basically for VAT perspective. The examiner will include amounts. It's important to understand whether these are inclusive or exclusive. To understand whether what is being given to you is exempt or taxable. To understand whether it's a good or a service, because ascertaining those helps you apply yourself, helps you to apply whatever VAT you have. Because the VAT implications on all those is different. For example, the VAT implications on goods is different from the VAT implications on services. It's different from exempt and taxable supplies. So it's important to know where you're coming from. What is it that is presented before you? Then, of course, for stamp duty, I can't emphasize it. Read the acts. The beauty is that it's small. Same with excise duty and lotteries and gaming. It's very important to read that, because you will find that question 1 has a mix of everything. You find it has VAT, it has probably some stamp duty, and it also has excise duty, or sometimes some lotteries and gaming. So know when to apply yourself and on what. Is this VAT? Is the examiner looking out for VAT? Is this stamp duty? I will get to that as we probably go through one of the case study that we'll decide to look at. So moving on, case study. How do we approach a case study question? The reason we picked out a case study is because it carries 50 marks. Now, when you fail a case study question, it means it's very highly unlikely that you will pass. Because the other 2 questions carry 50 marks, and it's very unlikely that you score all the 50. So if you do very well, you probably do 45. So it's important that the case study question is well understood, that it's read very carefully and understood, that case study that is put before you. I cannot emphasize it any further. Do not rush through it. These are 50 marks at stake. Can we take our time? Read through it. As you read through, if you have a pencil, please start to underline some key things, because the examiner is going to throw in certain things that a learner should be interested in. For example, anyway, I think we'll go through the example and you will see. So it's important that you read through and understand the case study after you've read through, because that case study has, it's quite huge. Break it in 2 parts. For example, I know case study, most common case studies will require you to identify when that person was supposed to register for VAT. Let's break it down. If it's, because case study usually has VAT, can we know what the sales are? Can we know what the purchases are? Can we know what output and input is? Okay, so break it in 2 parts and analyze each part. Analyze each part separately. Uncover the underlying issues that need to be addressed. And this is what I was telling you about. The examiner will throw in certain things that if you're not keen, you will miss out. So evaluate your answers and present your findings. If you're very good, please always put some support in form of, the law, in form of a case law, in case of sections of the law, which earns you extra marks. It's also very important to set time as you start your case study. Know that you have to answer 3 questions in 3 hours. However, question 1, which carries 50 marks, deserves an hour and maybe 15 minutes or an hour and 20, depending on how you will allocate your time. Say I need to give myself 1 hour on this question. And keep track. If it means putting your watch there to keep looking at you, keep track. Move. If you're not sure of that answer, move to the next part. If you're not sure of that, move to the next part, so that you manage time. And then the hard parts, you come to them later. And when you have answered the things you're very okay with, and then now you start thinking through the hard questions. So it's very important to keep track of your time. So now, once I have taken you through that, I want us to go through the case study for November 2023, one of the exams that was sat in November, and what we needed to look out for. I don't know if any of us has that, exam, or if I need to look to present it, or I can just go through what we need. But I think to manage time, I'll probably guide you on what you needed to look out for and maybe summarize it, because it's quite long. So if I go through it, it may take time, right, Justus?
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Just a minute. So for just a minute, I'm trying to have the questions so that maybe I don't want to share the entire question, but I want to remind you, if any of you has looked at it. November question 1 was basically about a company that was dealing or operating in hotel and lodge in Kapchora. Do we remember that? It was dealing in hotel and lodging. It was located in Kapchora. It was providing a number of services that included conference facilities, accommodation, outside catering, among others. It had a number of purchases. Maybe I should share this and we'll go through it. Let me just share this screen to help
Sharing it is better.
Yeah, let me just share it so that we understand
Summarize it. Yeah,
yes, as opposed to just going through it. Let me just share it. Okay, I hope you can see it. So it was about this. It was about an entity that operates in a hotel and lodge in Kapchora. So alone operating lodge and hotel in Kapchora district should trigger something in your mind as a student of VAT. Okay. Then the examiner still emphasizes it's approximately 285 kilometers away from Kampala. That is meant to trigger something if you're well versed with Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 of the VAT Act. Of course, it talks about the company being registered and all that. And then they come and talk about the business activities that the company is involved in. They talk about provision of conference facilities, accommodation, outside catering, among others. This alone, as a VAT student or as an indirect taxes student, should also trigger something in your mind. What is taxable? What is exempt? Are these operations or business activities taxable in accordance with the VAT Act? Are there any that could be exempt? Okay. Moving on, the company has been in operation since June 2022, providing services to tourists. I can move on. Finally, the accountant has had some disagreements for failure to issue IFRS invoice. That also should trigger something. This is IFRS. And then they give you data that ranges from June to December 2022 of that company. That data has conference facilities, it has accommodation and outside catering with various sales that were made by that company. Moving on, then they add you certain information. For example, they tell you that in June sales, a transaction worth 1.9 million that related to walk-in clients was not included. What does that mean? That your sales in June that you have will have to be increased by 1.9. So it's very important that as you read through this case study, each item is, dissected and, understood very well, because every statement the examiner makes is never, it's very important to remove the mask, lift the veil, as the saying goes, lift the veil and try to see what is behind there. What is the examiner testing? Okay. So that is for June. Then, of course, they go in and bring in certain purchases that the company made. One is from Handle Hygiene, relating to sanitary waste handling services. There's another one for imported furniture from Kenya. That's also another very important thing which students underlook. This entity imported furniture from Kenya with cost insurance of that and freight. And pesticides, that's also very key, okay, from Malaysia to be used to control various pest infections. So when you see furniture from Kenya, what comes to your mind? And they are talking about importation, cost insurance, and freight. There should be something that is triggered. When you see pesticides, what comes to your mind? Those are some, and you can only have those triggers if you have read the law and understood it. That I cannot emphasize it further. In October, we see the company sent an e-invoice to make Mary for transporting. Okay. However, the examiner down here still comes and emphasizes the company is not a tour and travel operator. The examiner could not have put that for no reason. So as a learner, can we unmask that? Why is the examiner emphasizing that this is not a tour and travel operator? There must be something in there that needs to be unveiled or needs to be brought to light. Of course, they proceed, talk about the purchases. Of course, when you see purchases, what should be in your mind is input VAT. And the examiner is testing your input knowledge here. So they are purchasing beds, towels, curtains, and all that for their newly constructed cottages. In November, still, there's laundry services and stationery services. Still, all this is input. You see telephone bills, that's all input. You see meals and refreshments, that's all input that they are trying to test. In December, there's also an events management. That's still input that they are trying to, Then there is staff vouchers. So all that is to test your knowledge. And then, of course, there is that the entity received 13 million from the highest bidder of Toyota. So that ceases to be input. So this is for you to assess, is this a sale or is it, of course it's a sale. When you assess it's a sale, is it taxable or is it not? Okay. So you realize that the examiner is mixing, throwing things here and there. Input, then there is purchases, there are sales. There are purchases, there are sales. So if you're not keen and you do a rush reading, it will be very, it's very, you will likely miss out certain things. So take note, because this is within, input, this sale of Toyota Hilux. So you could easily miss it and think it's input, and yet it's a sale. Of course, they proceed and talk about electricity, that's input. They bring in URA and talking about IFRS. When you see IFRS, you know what the examiner is looking for. Don't undermine it. And finally, the questions now come to determine the period for which the entity ought to have applied for registration. So it's important that once you have this question, you now sit and try to understand, what does the examiner want? So I'll take you back to my points. I don't know if my screen is still showing. I hope it is. So for that question, as a learner, what are those areas that needed to trigger your mind? What was required? What were the tricky areas in the questions? What were the easy marks to pick out of that question? So after taking you through the questions, unfortunately, it's a Zoom. I wish we had had a physical meeting where I can ask people to, point out. But the points that you needed to consider when you are faced with that question, or when you're faced with a similar question. One, they were asking you to determine the period that the company ought to have registered and its effective date. Now, when they ask you when the company ought to register, they told you the company started in June 2022. It's now important that you start to do your computation. You should be well versed with Section 7 and 8 of the VAT Act that talk about registration. That section, all those sections, talk about the various types of registration. They talk about the mandatory registration, the voluntary registration, the forced registration. Okay? So when you see such a question, you should know the fact that they are asking about registration. This is under Section 7. Okay? So you now start to do what? To do your computation. Now, the other trick that the examiner will give you, the examiner is highly likely going to give you amounts that are inclusive. Now, as you do your computation, it's important to know that you need to use exclusive amounts to determine when this person ought to have registered. That's another area where students lose it. An examiner will give you, where they don't tell you, for example, like this question, the examiner didn't say, it's with exclusive amounts. I hope we all know how to get exclusive amounts when we are given essentially, it means get that fee, multiply it by 100 and divide it by 118. You might be having a simpler way, but for me, that's how I do it. For you to get an exclusive amount. You cannot do a computation to determine registration with inclusive amounts. Kindly take note of that. Then as you do, remember when I was reading the question, it had a number of things, what the company provides, what it operates in. It operated in outside catering, it operated in accommodation, and I think, what else was it? Just a minute. And conference facilities. So now that you see conference facilities, accommodation, and outside catering, what should trigger your mind? What should trigger your mind? Are these taxable for VAT purposes? So the student here was supposed to understand that the supply of accommodation in tourist hotels and lodges located upcountry is exempt. Now, anyone who didn't have that, of course, it means they failed the question, because it means that at the point of computing the period within which this person ought to have registered, you included sales from accommodation, and yet sales from accommodation are exempt. The reason is it's under Schedule 2 to the VAT Act, exempting the supply of accommodation in tourist hotels and lodges located upcountry. That's why I told you, when you're reading the question, see what the examiner is hiding in there. The examiner put located in Kapchora. What was it? Why do we have a hotel in Kapchora? What is the examiner trying to look for? Okay. And of course, after you have assessed that, so for anyone who included sales from accommodation, of course, now there you know you have failed, because it's going to give you a wrong period within which to register. You're going to determine the wrong VAT payable. You're going to determine the wrong input. Clearly, you will have the whole question wrong. And like I said, once you miss out on the 50 marks, it's unfortunate. The other area that we note or that we observe as examiners is that the VAT, because the information provided to us in the case study, it covered from June to December. We saw a number of students aggregating VAT for the entire period of June to December. And yet, like I said earlier, VAT is on a monthly basis. You cannot aggregate. It's not income tax, unfortunately. So you have to know that I have to first compute VAT for June. I have to, that's if they were registered anyway in June, if they were required to register in June. I have to compute for each month as opposed to aggregating all the months. It's also important to bear in mind, because like I said, this company was dealing in both exempt and taxable supplies. It had accommodation, and yet it was offering conference facilities. It was offering outside catering services. So it means it was dealing in both exempt and taxable supply. What does that mean, or what should it trigger? It should trigger that the input you're going to claim is going to be apportioned, because your entity is dealing in both exempt and taxable supplies. So you cannot claim all the input. You're going to go and apportion your input based on the percentage provided in the law, the standard alternative method or the other method. Okay? So those are some of the things that should be triggered in your mind as you're answering that problem question. Moving on. The other points that you should have considered in that question, when we are doing, when we start to do the answers, what was expected from you, and if you sat down and tried to revise that exam, you will note that for June, and we are using exclusive amounts, for June, the person will not have met the threshold. July and August. But when you add the 3 months, you see that that person met the threshold of 37.5 million in August. Okay, that means that person ought to have registered by 20th September. That means their effective date of registration should have been 1st October. Okay? And that should trigger something. For you to master VAT, you need to understand those first sections. From section 4, the charging section, section 7, you must understand section 7. I don't know how to emphasize it. Most questions, most
Excuse me,
examiners will.
Dorcas.
Yes,
Dorcas, excuse me.
yes.
Yeah, I'll break a bit. Members, I will expect your questions to be posted in Q&A. And Dorcas, there is a question which has already been given to you. I've posted it on WhatsApp.
Okay.
And it has come by WhatsApp. I've put it on WhatsApp. So you can look at it, and then I encourage more other people to put in Q&A, and we'll continue. Thank you so much. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Justice. So essentially what the examiner will look for as they are setting their exam in like I was talking about the other points to consider. If you did that question and tried to see when the person was meant to register, you will realize that that person was meant to register by 1st October, their effective date of registration. They were meant to register by 20th September. So what should that trigger? It means that the sales that were made in August and September should be analyzed. Why should they be analyzed? They should be analyzed to assess whether these are stock at hand or capital goods acquired within the last 6 months before the effective date of registration. Excuse me. So if at the point of computing your VAT payable, because there was a question on compute the VAT payable, if at the point of computing your VAT payable, you had VAT payable in August, then you are wrong. If you had VAT payable in September, then you are wrong, because you missed out the point that the examiner was trying to bring out. The examiner was trying to assess whether you know that the law provides that it would only allow stock at hand or capital goods acquired within last 6 months before the date of registration for you to, to consider that input. So if you included sales for August and September, then probably you are offside. So it's important that you know when you look at the question that the examiner has set before you, try to read his mind, try to understand what the examiner is trying to test, okay? Then, in addition, there was a sale to make merry when I was reading that question, and it related to passenger transportation. But you remember the element that I pointed out, where the examiner pointed out that the company was not in tour and travel operations. Like I said, it was important for you to try and understand why the examiner was saying that. That was meant to test you to see whether you would, treat this sale as taxable, and yet it's exempt under the second schedule. Second schedule says that passenger transportation services other than tour and travel operators are exempt. So if you treated this sale as taxable, then of course the examiner could not have, given you a point for that. Then of course at the end, as we are reading, we saw this company bringing in furniture from Kenya. So the examiner there is trying to see if you understand the taxable applicable at importation. That is import duty, excise duty, and VAT. However, as they were talking about the importation, the company brought in furniture and pesticides, and I remember emphasizing that. Now, pesticides are an exempt supply, still under Schedule 2. That was meant to test you. Do you understand your second schedule to the Act? So if there's anything that you can, if you have to pass VAT, specifically for VAT, you're going to have to understand second schedule and third schedule. Because anything not in second and third schedule, then it's taxable. I think for me, that's the trick. Actually, I would rather read and understand second schedule and third schedule, because I know that anything not in third schedule and second schedule, then it's taxable at 18%. But second schedule is exempt and third schedule is zero rated. So it's important to have those at your fingertips. And that's what the examiner will be testing. The other point, they talked about furniture coming from Kenya. So as you're busy computing your VAT and import duty, here the examiner was trying to test whether you would know that Kenya is within the East African community and there's no import duty. Okay? So it's important that as questions are put before you, you understand what the examiner is trying to look out for. Of course, the other point was, imported furniture. Should it be considered as input? The input on imported furniture. Of course, it is a capital item. So the input, remember this furniture was brought in, I think, in August, okay? Before the effective date of registration. So here the examiner is testing whether you will know that the input on furniture will be claimed because it relates to capital items that are acquired within the last 6 months before the effective date of registration. I think for me, those are the major things I would bring out. If we go under input specifically, you would see, for example, there were beddings, curtains. It's important that you know that this company is in the business of entertainment, okay? And if it's in the business of entertainment, it essentially means that beddings, curtains are its business. So remember, input VAT under Section 28 of the VAT Act says it disqualifies input relating to entertainment. So if you decide to look at beddings, curtains, and everything that comes with that as entertainment, excuse me, and forget that the entity before you is in the business of entertainment, and you disallow the input based on Section 28, then you'll be offside. So it's important to first appreciate that the entity before you is in the entertainment business, and therefore the input incurred on beddings, on curtains, on meals will be allowed, or it will be claimed, So those are majorly some of the pointers I would bring out. Of course, the other part of the question had a question about IFRIS, which I think by now, as learners of VAT or as learners of indirect taxes, we should know that IFRIS now is the end thing. Like, that's the big thing that URA is chasing right now. So you should know what it means if you're, issuing invoices that are not in compliance with the IFRIS regulations, what implications in regard to the VAT Act and the Tax Procedure Code Act. Will you claim the input if you don't have a fiscalized invoice? Will you be able to file the VAT return? Can URA come and, close your business? Will you be listed, or will you be considered to be listed on the VAT withholding exemption list? Those are some of the things that should be triggered when they talk about IFRIS and non-compliance of IFRIS. So for input, by now we should, be very well versed with Section 28. When you see an entity in entertainment, largely the things that are in entertainment that would ordinarily be entertainment and be disallowed will pass as input. For example, we had vouchers. This company is in an entertainment sector, so such input will be allowed. We had things to do with, I think, staff party. That input will be allowed. Then there was a sale auctioning at Toyota Hilux. I hope we are aware of Section 10 of the Act, I think subsection 4, that talks about that supply by auction is considered a supply of goods by the auctioneer. And that sale would definitely be considered taxable by the company, and output VAT would have to be accounted for. So those are some of the things that I would have expected learners to pick out if you want to be, to excel, to be a great tax practitioner. You should have, of course, I just used November 2023, but the examiner, you will find an examiner bringing in, some instruments chargeable to stamp duty. For example, you will see them saying there was a check, there was an agreement that was signed between, so and so. That should trigger your mind. I know that those are instruments chargeable to stamp duty. And then you by now go to that schedule, I think it's Schedule 2 of the Stamp Duty Act, and know what is the stamp duty for such instruments. So yes, largely that's what I would say on question 1. What do we need to avoid as we sit our exams? As I conclude, I can't emphasize, avoid cherry picking topics. Like what I earlier said, stop spotting, read everything, avoid cramming. Like I told you, law changes every year. So if you're going to cram and say pesticides are exempt, it could be that this July they are moved from the exempt schedule and maybe charged or maybe taken to 0 rated. So avoid cramming because the law changes every year. Of course, avoid missing class, attend classes if you can, attend classes, attend group discussions. They will help you understand the theory, the practical, and all the scenarios that the examiners may bring. Of course, avoid attempting few questions. Try and attempt all the questions required in the exam. In the indirect tax paper, they require you to attempt 3 questions. Question 1 as mandatory, and the other 2 questions, to pick 2 questions from the 3. So ensure that you attempt the 3 questions. Otherwise, if you attempt 2, it means that you're working out of 75 as opposed to 100. Okay, I think for me, that's what I can say right now. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I welcome any questions, any guidance, any supplement, any clarification, any additions that you might have. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dorcas. Thank you, thank you. It is indeed has been paid, has been well presented. Our officials has paid. It is interesting to listen to a member of the Law Society who is a tax expert. The language, the way it is presented, and the way the content is flowing is really very, 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 very nice, very exciting. Listeners and participants, thank you so much for listening in and for taking part. The way I look at it, the participants had questions related to the paper, maybe the question you have presented, as if all of them are answered. We have a few of them here. One, not questions as such, but comments. This one, actually, this person at 11:50, it was 15 minutes, 20 minutes after the start of the presentation. And Paul was saying we sent the slides after. I don't know whether he's still on, but he wants the slides, and the slides will be shared, but not soon after this presentation, but they will come your way. And then There is another one who's asking, do you lecture the paper? That
No.
question she may not answer because I don't know whether she lectures, but me, I know her as an expert, and she's
No,
at
I don't lecture.
KPMG.
Yes.
She's putting it straight that she doesn't lecture.
Mm.
But if you have to ask her anything related to tax issues and uh, tax matters and case law and what, she's at KPMG. You can always try your luck and you talk to her and you see what she's saying. Otherwise, as far as the paper is concerned, she has given the answer. She doesn't lecture the paper, and that is it.
No, I don't. Mm.
Okay, then members, if you have any other question, because we started late, I would give it like 10 minutes so that we close like at 1:45. If you have any other question, any other comment, you can post it in the Q&A. We shall be able to respond to it. Otherwise, if there are no comments and no other questions, I will prepare my friend, the land friend, Dr. Chungwirwe Kabaho, to finally give us the final remarks in the last like 3 minutes. Final remarks, I want you to, you have said it over and over again, if you were the student, if you are the student, if you are the student, you do this. But I want it to be again summarized. If I'm a student of May, this coming, I will do this, I would have done this, and then we shall conclude. But that is after we have given some space of like 2 minutes to see whether there's any question. Then there is a question here coming in that where do we get tuition providers from? That is Pius asking where to get tuition providers. That question is a bit wild because at this end for us, we are giving the assessment, but there are so many tuition providers. And when you go to them, like you go to UMI, you go to Math Abacus, you go to TM University, you go to Martech, the moment you go there, if they are not providing, they will tell you where it's provided. Otherwise, that is really out there with you. You ask friends what they are doing. Some of them are providing as individual tuition providers, others may be in a class. So kindly, Pius, interact with your colleagues and team up and see how to go over the challenge. And if it persists, then you can pass by and we'll talk more about how you can go over the paper, as I had said. So, Dorcas, kindly come in again and summarize as a student of CTA 6 in May, what you have done and what you ought to do, and we'll close the session. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Justus. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As a student and as a practitioner who keeps learning, because learning never ends. Like I said, law keeps changing. So as a student, one, I would be very open-minded, and be very positive. Don't close your mind. I know I have seen that trend among accountants who tend to close their minds to the laws, but you'll not be a tax professional without embracing the laws. Read the law as it is, try to understand it as you can. Study the questions, read the past papers. I guess examiners will still, twist things here and there. Practice through past papers. Discuss as much as you can as you prepare for the exam. And of course, have the basics on your fingertips. When we talk about VAT, there are basics that you should know. You should know that VAT has an exempt status, it has a standard rated status of 18% and a zero rated status. They are basics that we need to know. If we talk about excise duty, for example, what are we talking about? We should know that excise duty is imposed on locally manufactured goods that sometimes may tend to be luxurious in nature. And of course, it's also imposed on excisable services. We should know what those excisable services are. And yet we pay excise duty every time you transact on mobile money. Those are some of the things we should embrace. Every time they are charging you excise duty on mobile money, and yet you are a student of tax, of indirect taxes, and you're not inquiring to know where is this coming from. You probably hold bank accounts. There's excise duty that is charged on those financial services, on telecommunications, airtime, mobile money transfers. Those are some, have the basics. You should know that, excise duty is considered, the moment you understand these taxes, it's the best way that you find yourself answering the questions easily. If you understand that excise duty usually is essentially meant to discourage consumption, ordinarily it used to be considered as sin tax. For example, it will be imposed on things like beer, wine, cigarettes, things that they feel like, perfumes, cosmetics, cement, name it, soft drinks, soda, things that do not come easily on, for a day-to-day person. So they feel like, this is a consumption tax. It's essentially meant to discourage how much you take. For example, if you're taking soda, you know that you're paying a certain percentage on excise duty. So have the basics and understand. If it's stamp duty, for example, you know that stamp duty is instruments. The moment you see a check, the moment you see an agreement, the moment you see a transfer of shares, the moment you see an increase of shares, the moment you see something that is, standing out, then it should trigger your mind to stamp duty. Same with lotteries and gaming. Have the basics that person requires a license. They are required to file a return on a monthly. They can also be assessed and they have to object. You'll find that the laws, all these laws that relate to indirect taxes, are almost similar. For example, the objection process, the appeal, and everything like that. So if I was a student of CTA, I would try and have the basics, have an understanding of all the taxes that, go into indirect taxes, and know how to apply myself on paper when a question is put before me. So I wish you the very best as you prepare for your exams. I wish you the very best, as come out with flying colors. So thank you once again for listening to me and for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. Back to you, Justus.
Thank you so much, Dorcas and members, participants. Let us put our minds and our hands together and thank Dorcas for this very, very helpful presentation. Myself, have listened in and have really got more sharpened on issues of indirect taxes. The way it is presented, the way I need to prepare my mind for the exam has been really spot on. Thank you so much. And may God continue to bless you and to raise you as you serve the Institute in various aspects. I would like to invite Esther Sachi, if you are on, kindly give an update of what is taking place and what is taking place tomorrow to listeners, and then we shall close. CPA Esther, if you are on. CPA Esther, are you on? All right, she may not be on, but what I will tell you is that this was CTA 6, indirect taxes, and we shall have international taxation at 2, and then we shall close the day. That is okay. Okay, Esther is coming to give us a general brief on what comes next. Esther, kindly talk to the people as we close. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our session chair. Thank you so much, our presenter. So in the afternoon, we shall be having CTA 10, the national taxation. Kindly turn up in big numbers. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.